Good evening, everyone. And here in America, it's almost the 4th of July, but Diddy will not be celebrating his independence at home with his family this season, as the judge just moments ago has denied his bail, forcing him to remain behind bars awaiting his sentence. Good evening. I'm Ethan Grayson. You're watching Dark Truth. Thank you for being with us. Now, we have a lot to get into this evening as the verdict in the Diddy trial has finally been announced. Now, the prosecutors are most likely seeing this as a major loss, considering the heart of this case, the racketeering charge, Diddy was acquitted on. But Diddy's not free at last because he faces up to 20 years in federal prison on the Mann Act charges. Now, relating to the prosecution, they sent a letter to the judge today declaring that Diddy is a continued flight risk and should not be released on bail and should not be sentenced to anything like house arrest. That's something the judge considered today in denying his bail request. We have a lot of discussion to get to, and let me bring up our special guest who's going to be breaking down all of the legal knowledge behind Diddy's verdict and sentence. We have attorney Allie coming up. She's been on Court TV. She's had a lot to say about the Diddy trial and a lot to say about the Karen Reed trial. So let's welcome attorney Allie up to the stage. Good evening.
Hi, Ethan. Good evening. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First, I just want to say, what is your natural, raw reaction to the verdict here today?
I'm sort of surprised, honestly. Particularly, I'm most surprised about the RICO trial, or the RICO charges, because in my opinion, and I've been saying it from the beginning, I thought that he would be convicted of the RICO charges and count 3 and 5, which was what he was convicted of. But I thought the S trafficking was less likely.
So tell me why you think the S trafficking was less likely. I know, especially for Cassie Ventura, I thought it would be rather clear just because the fact the jury saw more video, they saw more information there. Now with Jane, I was back and forth. But in addition to that, this is a letter we're putting up. Well, now we're going to pictures with Diddy and Cassie. So this is a relationship they had, and I think maybe some people had a hard time drawing the line from where was consent and where was force and coercion. So what's your opinion on that, Lee?
Yeah, so I saw Jane Doe testify. I was in the courtroom, and her demeanor and the way she spoke, and her answers led me to believe that there may be some element of consent. And I don't mean that she consented every single time, but there were some elements of consent. And to me, a jury hearing that would think, oh, that's reasonable doubt. So therefore, I thought that was less likely. I do think that with regards to the videos of the domestic I thought those would stick in the jury's head and they might get a conviction on that. But when she testified, the text messages that came in, a lot of them were, I love you, can't wait to see you again, kissy faces, hearts, all of that stuff. And a lot of that to a jury seems like consent. I'm not saying she wasn't blackmailed based off a mental abuse, which I think is a very real thing here. But some of it, I think, and also it may have started as consent. And I think that is something that the jury considered.
And I agree with you full-heartedly, because that's one thing I was concerned about with this case was in regards to Jane. She said she loved Diddy a lot. There were a lot of text messages that kind of made the jury question, was there consent? Was this a true coercion or abuse? And, as jurors, not being psychologists or having type of education specializing in that, they may not fully understand all the aspects of that type of abuse. But I certainly think they were abused, and it's clear, but maybe the jury had a hard time tying that domestic violence back to the charges at hand. What did you think initially as the deliberations went underway about juror number 25? That was the juror that got a note sent to the judge about him in regards to him not following the judge's directives.
Yeah, so immediately when I saw that, I thought, oh no, this is screaming appeal, right? From a legal perspective, it's screaming appeal. So I initially thought, because they were only like an hour and a half in, that the judge is like, wait, we're not going to leave this room for appeal. Swap him or her out. It's a him now. I realize that. Swap him out. You're only an hour and a half in. You can start over. But he didn't do that. And I said, if Diddy gets convicted, right, the first thing they're going to say is juror number 25 refused to follow the judge's instructions.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a huge appeal issue. Now, I given the verdict, is it that big of an issue? Probably not, because he's not going to appeal, is my guess. He escaped the most serious charges, and certainly the federal government's not going to appeal. So at this point, I don't think it was a big deal, but my initial reaction was like, oh no.
And that's something I flagged initially, but then it seemed to just down. And then when the jury was hung up on the issue of racketeering, let's take a look at the verdict sheet the jury was given. So looking at that verdict sheet, and specifically on this first page, there's a lot that falls up under RICO. So RICO, it's not something, if you say the word, what does it really mean? It means kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, trafficking, transportation for the purposes, and then substance distribution. And so Diddy escaped that almost entirely. Now, the testimony throughout this trial touched on every little bit of that. So do you think the jurors just didn't believe the part specifically relating to the arson of Kid Cudi's car, or the assistant who testified that Diddy and his employees had her essentially kidnapped to take a lie detector test over days at a time? And all of those things really check the boxes in my mind. But what do you think the jury was thinking in that room?
I'm really struggling, like I said, with the RICO charges, because to me, that was the most proven. I think the conviction of the transportation of the sex workers was also proven. But the RICO, like we talked about the arson of Kid Cudi's car. We talked about the kidnapping for the lie detector. They obviously talked about trafficking. I mean, all of those things. And plus, also, RICO is a criminal enterprise, right? So it's almost like a racketeering. So they're showing bank statements, they're showing videos, they're showing all of these things. And like I keep saying, juries like tangible things they can see and hold. So they can rewatch the video, they can look at the bank statements, for 100 hours straight. It's not like they have to remember their testimony and rely on their notebook. So I thought that the RICO was charged. So I want to know, when whoever mainstream media gets a juror for this trial, I want to know what the reasonable doubt was with RICO. That's what I want to know.
Exactly. And then additionally, and that's a point I made several times in talking about this case, they don't have to meet every single one of those RICO acts. It's just 2. So it really seemed like a cut and dry issue, but that was the one that he was escaping out on. And I thought that would be the immediate yes, because even if Cassie Ventura and Jane weren't the most credible, or there were conflicting issues, especially because they were both in a relationship with Diddy at one time, the RICO kind of includes them, but also includes a lot of other behavior types. Turning to the reactions, what have you seen in the legal community as reactions to this case?
So it's a bit split, like the public. Some of my colleagues, particularly women, are disgusted by the verdict. But a lot of lawyers keep saying that they didn't make their case. I disagree with that in regards to the RICO. The trafficking, I was torn, right? Because we talked about this, the consent, and I watched her demeanor. I mean, I
Mhm.
can't speak for Cassie because I didn't watch her, but
Yeah.
I watched Jane Doe's demeanor. I mean, she's still very much, it's my opinion that she's very much in love with him still. She basically was drooling at the mouth talking about him. And a lot of her texts were, I don't want to do a freak off, but I want to do things with you. I want to hang out with you. I want you to buy me bags, take me out to dinner, right? So I thought that there was doubt there, and a lot of the legal community is saying that the RICO is so hard to prove in the federal government, which I agree. It's probably the hardest
Yeah.
crime to prove in the federal government, that it just wasn't enough. His bank statements and the testimony wasn't enough. But I keep saying, I don't know how, and again, I'm a defense attorney, but I don't know how it wasn't enough. I mean, you heard from the escorts, you heard from the employees, you heard from the victims. You didn't hear from Diddy, obviously, but you saw the bank statements, you saw the video. What more do you need to prove racketeering? I mean, I don't know.
I know, and that's kind of where I'm at exactly. It's sitting on the outside, and that's something I've said on my lives multiple times. All of the majority of us are sitting on the outside, so we've never physically seen it like you had the opportunity and some others had the opportunity to do. And so just being on the outside, hearing what the jury has seen enough to me to establish some of those elements. There is something very criminal going on here when you raid a man's home and he has drugs and firearms with serial numbers filed off and piles of money. What does that give you imagery of? It's not someone who's a law-abiding citizen, that's for sure. So go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, apparently, I've been hearing rumors that after the verdict was read, he already had his plane landed in the New York airport. And again, that's a rumor. I don't know if it's true, but
Mhm.
it's like, dude, you don't even know if you're leaving here, and also you're not supposed to be on a plane. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why I think the judge denied bail, because Diddy has had a disregard for any rules of the court. Throughout this trial, he has been reprimanded by the judge for making googly eyes at the jury, smiling at the jurors, nodding at the jurors. He could hardly keep himself in his seat and composed when Cassie Ventura was testifying. He was putting his palms in his hand and several other gestures that his attorney should have told him are not appropriate for the courtroom. And so in the judge's statement just 30 minutes ago, in denying Diddy's bail, he said that Diddy has had a clear disregard for the rule of law and a propensity of violence. So this judge, I would say, has played it pretty fair to both sides. Now, Diddy's side has, constantly, pushed the boundaries when they tried to flag for mistrial and flag for different things. But I think the judge has been really steadfast in streaming this process forward and trying to carry out the adequate measure of justice. And so that leads into what's going to come next, which is the sentencing. So we know the max there is going to be 20 years. That's the max on the two counts. What are your thoughts about the potential sentencing?
So I don't think he's going to serve the max. I don't think that he's going to get sentenced to the max because it's 10 for each, correct? So that would
Yep.
mean a consecutive of 20. I could see him doing like split the baby 5 and 5, 10,
Mhm.
or, 5 concurrent. So he's not going to want to do, this is just my legal opinion, is that he's not going to want to do consecutively because that leaves more room for appeal in
Mhm.
my experience. So I think he'll either extend them like 5 to 7 or 10 concurrent, because that's less of an appeal chance. Not that I think Diddy's going to appeal, but I feel like maybe if he gets significant prison time, which is what he's looking at, he might appeal. And the man's what,
Mhm.
56 or something? I
Yeah.
mean, 10 years, 10 prison years
Yeah.
at 56. I mean, it's better than the rest of his life, but still that's a hefty sentence.
Well, for somebody who's accustomed to a $50 million Palm Beach mansion, it's going to take its toll. And it already has. Just since last September, he's already gone completely gray and got a beard. And so people have said Diddy's looking rough just in this short period of time. Now, everybody is wanting to know when sentencing will occur. And we got some information from the judge on a proposed sentencing date. So the proposal is October the 3rd at 10 a.m. Now that's the proposed sentencing, and the judge said he may move that up on the defense's request. Now, this letter is something I'm going to address in regards to the bail. And these letters were sent on a whim today to the judge. This letter accompanies a letter from Cassie Ventura asking the judge to keep Diddy remanded at the federal prison because he is a danger to society, the public, and especially the witnesses that testified against him. Now, this is Cassie's hairdresser who testified during this trial to some of the aspects of abuse. He saw Cassie getting traumatized both emotionally and physically by Diddy multiple times. And so he was Cassie's hairdresser. He was very close and involved in her life. And so being in the midst of that bubble, he got to witness firsthand some of the things that Diddy has done. And so it's witnesses like Cassie's hairdresser. It's all these accompanying witnesses that really make it shocking to me that, and this is him leaving the courtroom after testifying, that there wasn't a conviction, at least for Cassie. Because in my opinion, there was a settlement, and I believe that was finally confirmed at this trial. So Cassie got a settlement as the result of some of the things that she's had to endure. And so having to relive it after you've already gotten something is something that I don't think anyone want to do unless they wanted justice, not just for themselves, but for all the other victims. Because something else I want to draw your attention to and get your comment on is there was about 34 witnesses here, and that includes the victims that were named, such as Cassie and Jane Doe. Those were some of the headline victims, but there's a lot of other victims outside of this trial. There are hundreds of civil lawsuits that are in the midst. So these victims didn't get this through the criminal route, justice that I don't think anybody's really going to be too happy with, because the main headline or charges are what he's walking away on. So what is the likelihood of the civil cases? Do you think the civil cases could still have a chance, or what is your take on all the victims that are still out there in the world?
Well, the burden of proof for the civil cases is significantly less. And I don't know if Diddy wants any more bad rap on him. I feel like Diddy is a kind of person that'll just say, here, take this money for settlement and goodbye. In addition, will any of these states bring charges, right? So if victims come forward and say, he did this to me, he did this to me, will any state courts pick it up? And I've been thinking about that recently. Just because the federal court lost on the RICO doesn't mean like he could be charged. Now the statute of limitations is done, but for what he did to Cassie, or if he did that to someone else, he could be charged in state court criminally. So I do think that the civil cases at least will go forward. Some of them, it's really unfortunate because the general public cannot charge somebody with a crime. Normally it would have to be the DAs or the police department, unless you do a private criminal complaint. But so most of those, don't have criminal charges associated with them. So there's no real conviction that they can base it off of. Now, Cassie already settled. So there's no real, no harm, no foul to her. She's settled for 20 million. And I don't know, and you would know better than me on the civil side if you looked at it, but did Jane Doe file a civil suit?
Not that I know of. I haven't seen anything, and I really haven't looked at, which I know who she is. And everybody knows who she is. She's 50 Cent's, had the child with 50 Cent. So I haven't looked too much into it to see, but I haven't heard of it, if it has happened.
When I pulled the docket system like 2 weeks ago, I think I saw like 85 federal civil lawsuits.
Against Diddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're stacking up. And just putting it out there, what is the likelihood that he does get house arrest? Do you think he could get house arrest? I didn't think so either.
I don't
Um,
think so. I think, and especially I think that the judge denied bail today is a really good telling sign of what he's going to do in the sense of let him out on house arrest or probation. I
mhm.
originally thought, okay, maybe he'll do that, but he denied bail today and said that he disregarded court and he's a community safety risk, is essentially what he
Yeah.
said. And so if he actually believes that, which I do, he's not going to just say, okay, here's some probation, here's some house arrest, continue your behavior. I don't
Mhm.
think he's going to do that. I mean, he's only served what, 10 months? Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So he hasn't even served a full year yet. And then the judge's statement was very clear. The judge said, another quote from the judge, at trial, the defense conceded the defendant's violence in personal relationships, saying it happened in relation to Cassie, Sarah, and Jane. So he conceded the violence part, but, and that's something that was probably just in the jury room. He was charged with DB. So that, maybe it wasn't correlative. They said, well, maybe he did do this, but that's not that. And that was the argument from his attorney. His attorney said, yeah, he did the freak offs, but that's not illegal. And so there's been a lot of reactions from this. And I've been fighting the battle against those who've been supporting and on the free Diddy side all along, ever since September when he was first arrested. And so I'm going to play this for our audience, the video of some people reacting to Diddy's release. Well, not release, but just verdict today. And they celebrated it as it was a release. So let's bring up that video. Now, to that, I say I thought I've seen it all, but I continue to be in utter shock at some of the things that transpire in relation to this, because this group outside of the courthouse today were jumping in the streets and celebrating as he was walking out of there. And Diddy clearly thought he was walking out of there if the rumors are true about the airplane. And I've heard rumors such as Diddy whispered to his children or told his children through some way that he would be home for the 4th of July, which isn't happening. So in regards to that, what was your reaction to the audience outside of the courthouse? When you were there a few weeks ago, I believe, watching Jane's testimony, what was the atmosphere of the spectators outside and I guess inside the courtroom?
So a bit of it was quiet, right? So outside it was in the middle of the trial, so you had mainstream media there, but not most of the general public. There was maybe 15-20 members of the general public, a lot of TikTokers, people like that. Inside everyone was pretty quiet, respected Jane Doe testimony. You could tell that the people that were there in the overflow room in the courtroom knew that basically, I don't want to use the word force, but that Jane did not want to be there. And people knew that she was still in love with Diddy and that she was testifying for the prosecution because she had to. So it was very much, very quiet, respectful, except for when Diddy testified that Jane was his crack pipe. The courtroom busted out laughing and was like hysterical, and I didn't think that was funny. I thought it was honestly disgusting that you would refer to a female as an item that you use rugs with. I was like, what? These are not even in the same wheelhouse. But most of the people thought that was hysterical. But besides that, it was pretty calm. But I have seen some videos and some creators, live streaming outside, and it is pure madness out there. I've heard the police department has broken up many fights. People are screaming. So it's a bit crazy out there right now. I'm sure it's going to continue. I'm surprised, though, that the sentencing, I didn't know that the sentencing was October or potentially October 3rd. That's pretty late.
Okay, so that's yeah. And that's just came out about 30 minutes ago. And so currently with the sentencing, and that's why wanted to have you on a little bit later so we could see what things transpired throughout the day. The proposed date by the judge is October the 3rd. And then he said he would be open to moving it up on the request of defense. But additionally, and you can explain some of the legalities behind this and make sure I get the terminology correct. But from what I read in the judge's remarks, initially the defense, Diddy's attorneys, wanted to waive any type of argument regarding the sentencing, but now they want to present some type of argument as to why Diddy should not be sentenced to the maximum. So do you think that indicates the fact that they are wanting to argue in regards to the sentencing? Do you think that means that they're worried about a lengthy sentence? Or the maximum doesn't seem like something that, you know, you said it wouldn't necessarily happen. The maximum doesn't usually happen. And the judge has even said with these charges, he considered bail because the fact that he was convicted of the lesser of the charges by the jury. So what is your reaction to all of that new information?
I mean, I think the judge is going to do a happy medium in the guidelines. So as you know, there's federal guidelines. So it's based off your prior record score and the offense gravity score, which for S trafficking or interstate prostitution or whatever it is. I can't imagine the offense gravity score being that significant. It's not a violent offense. Even though Diddy's violent, that offense is not violent. So I can't imagine that the guidelines call for more than 3 to 5. The bigger question, I think, for the judges, is it going to be consecutive or concurrent, right? Is he going to stack them or run them at the same time? 2 different victims. So oftentimes that's consecutive, but then it opens that up for appeal purposes. And I do think if Diddy gets significant time, upwards of 3 to 5 years, maybe more, 10, I do think that he's going to appeal. He has the financial resources to do it. He has lawyers that will do it. I mean, why wouldn't he? What does he have to lose? Nothing.
And so explain a little bit more why that opens it up for appeals if it is consecutive. And then specifically, I want to touch a little bit more on, is it the judge's discretion to do concurrent? Because usually they do it consecutively if it's 2 different acts, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. So is that the judge's interpretation solely, or does the judge have to rely on whether or not it's 2 separate acts?
So in Pennsylvania and where I practice, consecutive and concurrent, and I believe this is for the federal government too, is completely discretionary.
Okay.
So that's why, and that answers your question of why it opens it up for appeal, because they're going to say that the judge abused his discretion in running it consecutively. Why couldn't he have served the same time for essentially the same act? Now it's 2 different victims, but it's the same act. So that gets dicey of what he's going to do. My guess is he probably will bring in the attorneys beforehand and ask them, you know, sometimes our judges do this. They ask them like, hey, I'm thinking about this sentence. Are you guys going to present any testimony to waiver, you know, or convince me for more or less? So I don't know, will Diddy present a sentencing memorandum? Will he talk himself to try to mitigate the sentence? Will he have his kids, his mom? I don't know. But the fact that they put it on October 3rd seems very odd to me. Usually we have sentencing dates within 60 days. But I practice in state court in Pennsylvania. It's required within 60 days unless there's just due cause. But October's what? How many months?
Yeah.
2. So yeah, okay. It's not that far. It's just 3 months. 3 months. It just seems far to me. And also the charges are not so significant that, you know, it's not like Brian Kohlberger where you have a whole family to read all these statements and all of that. It's not like that. So I don't know.
Okay. So and we'll just see they may speed it up in regards to the defense. So the defense was given that opportunity. So now it's kind of just waiting to see what happens, but that's where we stand today. And as for the weekend, Diddy's going to remain behind bars until the foreseeable future. And there's not going to be any possibility of bail, and even more so unlikely the possibility of home arrest. So do you have any closing remarks in regards to this case as a whole or what came out today?
Yeah, I'm a bit sad about the verdict today. I did think that I do personally think that that Diddy is guilty of Rico. I do think there was a partial consent on the girls. At least it started as consent. It may have been a blackmail of their career, which led to mental abuse, which is as sex trafficking. It's a sad case. As a female, I'm a bit disgusted in our justice system. And then, of course, we had Brian Kohlberger today. No, we didn't talk about that, but that also makes me sad. So I'm feeling a little bit down about this, our justice system and our juries. But I think that, the jury spoke. We have to respect it. That's why we have a justice system. 12, people of his peers decided that he was not guilty. And I just want to thank you, Ethan, for having me up today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Attorney Allie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was Attorney Allie, and we broke down a lot of what happened today here with the Diddy case. And so it appears Diddy will be serving time in federal prison, but not near enough time that a lot of people think he should. So in regards to this case, in regards to the here today, now it solely relies on the sentencing, which will be up to the judge. The judge will be able to hear arguments from both sides that will take place sometime in the near future. And October 3rd is currently the proposed sentencing date. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Thank you for joining me over here on YouTube this evening for The Dark Truth. Remember, I'm Ethan Grayson, and I hope to see you next time.